Hey guys, it's Kimberly from the Fat Quarter Shop, and we have Amanda Herring here, and she is going to show us how you make the Friendship Quilt Along. And on this video, she is showing us the helpful block, and she's going to show us how to machine applique. So let's get started.
Today I'm going to show you how to make the helpful block using machine applique featuring heat and bond light for a fusible method. First thing you're going to need is the Friendship Quilt templates, and these are available at fatquartershop.com. And from the package, you're going to need the Considerate template and Patient one. I like to do, I'm not sure if other people have a name for this, but we call it the shadow applique method. So I'm going to take my template and I'm going to draw right on my paper. And then what I like to do is cut out not on the line, but inside the line and outside the line. So I'm just going to eliminate some of this paper. It's out of my way. I'm going to cut, leaving myself just a small allowance on the outside. It doesn't need to be very big. This is all going to be cut away in the end. And then I'm going to do the same thing on the inside. And I want to leave a little bit, right around 1/8 of an inch, maybe a little bit less. Just enough that I can really make the edge of my fabric sticky. And I like to cut this away so that it doesn't make my fabric more stiff than it needs to be. I love Heat and Bond Light. I think it's a fantastic product, but I like to keep it just on the edges of my fabric pieces that I'm appliquing down. All right, so you can see this is what you want it to look like. Then we're just going to take a piece of fabric and I'm going to lay my piece of Heat and Bond on there. Just going to hold my iron directly on it. Make sure that it's nice and fused. And now I'm going to cut directly on the line. To make this simpler, I'm just going to cut this little piece of fabric away so that I have less to deal with. I'm going to cut directly on the line. And what that's going to do, it's just going to give me a little bit to stick on, make sure my fabric is nice and secure onto the base piece that I'm appliquing on. Just like that. So once you've done that with all of your pieces, you'll have 4 petals and 1 center, and you can see all of these are prepared for me to applique them on. I'm going to set these out of the way, and the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to give myself a center point on my block, but I'm not going to fold it in half the usual way. I'm going to fold it in half on a diagonal. And if you would like to, you can press this with your iron. I usually just finger press, but you can do whatever makes you most comfortable. And what this is going to do is it's going to give me a nice registration line of where I want to line up my leaf shapes. Now on each of these, I'm just going to peel off the paper backing that is left on my applique, and I'm going to line up my point with one of the creases here and one of the creases here so that it's fitting that diagonal perfectly. And I am going to line up everything on my block except for my circle, the center of the flower, to begin with. So I want to line up all of these pieces first. And I like to line them all up before I iron, because if I get one in the wrong place, then I have to start all the way over. So just take your time and get it all lined up before you go to the iron and press anything in. Okay, so I've got roughly the same space, pretty close to the same space between all of my petal points. I've got all of my petals lined up with my lines that I pressed in, so I know I've got this nice and lined up, and it's going to look good when I'm all the way done. Now I'm just going to press straight down because I don't want to disturb how I've laid out my petals. Sometimes if you get all crazy with your iron, things get a little bit messed up. So we're just going to make sure that's nice and pressed. Before I put my center on, I'm going to take this to the machine and I'm going to sew all of my petals on. All right, so the first thing you want to do before we start this is we're going to set it to a blanket stitch, and then you want to make sure you are aware which way your blanket stitch is moving. So it always moves to the left. So make sure you have your piece aligned so that your blanket stitch is moving in towards the center of the piece. I like to drop my needle in right where I'm going to start before I drop my foot down, and then I like to go super slow to make sure I'm not missing anything. Lots of people like to use a contrasting thread when they do a blanket stitch method like this, which I think is super cute and gives a little bit of a vintage feel. It was really common to use all black thread with the blanket stitch applique method, which is kind of looks pretty cool. So you can always think about using a contrasting thread if you want. Okay, now I'm to my end. I'm just going to lift up my foot. I'm going to pivot. Actually, before we do that, I'm going to go one stitch further, but I'm going to roll it with my hand so that I don't get ahead of myself. So I've gone just past my piece there. And now I'm going to rotate my petal. So what that's going to do is it's going to create a little box here at the end of my petal, which I like my stitches to come together nicely like that. You can only get that if you overshoot your piece by one stitch, which sometimes is just luck in how your stitches fall. Now the ends of these petals where I'm sewing now is going to be covered by our center that we're going to put on in just a minute. But I'm going to show you right now my little technique for finishing off your blanket stitch seams in a way that hides your, rather than overlapping your blanket stitch, this hides your finish a little bit better. So I'm just going to switch to a straight stitch now. And that is how I'm going to finish this off. Instead of doing my blanket stitch overlapping, I'm just going to come in with a nice little straight stitch at the end. And I kind of went over the edge a little bit there, which is going to be okay. It's not going to show. But that's how I like to do it so that I don't. The next thing we're going to do is sew the rest of these petals on, and then we're going to go and put our center on and finish the block. Okay, so now we've appliqued all of our petals on, and you might think, well, why did we applique all of that that's going to be hidden? And the reason why I like to do that is because it's really hard to disguise those seams coming into another piece. So I like to work from the bottom up and do one piece at a time. So now that we've done this, we're going to add on our circle using the same technique. We're just going to peel off our paper. And I've lost my lines on here when I pressed these pieces on. So you can either repress, finger press to get your diagonal back, or you can eyeball it. Just make sure you're a really good eyeballer. My husband calls it your eye-chrometer, so make sure your eye-chrometer is really good. And then if you feel confident with where that is, you're just going to press that on. Then we're going to go back to our machine and we're going to applique this piece on as well. I think when you're appliquing a circle on, you want to be the most careful because you can see where you transition your circle. So for sure don't go too fast when you're doing a circle. Go slow, rotate on every stitch so that you get a nice smooth finish on that seam. And if you're a super speedy sewer, like I can sometimes get a little bit of a lead foot, most machines have I'm not sure what it's called. I call it the slow down button or half speed button. If you want to really regulate your speed, you can just push that button and that will make sure you don't go too fast, because you can push your pedal down as hard as you want and it still won't go super fast. It's a great way to regulate yourself if you need to. Ooh, see, it wouldn't do that to me if I had my half speed regulator on there. whatever, I'm not sure what that's even called. I'm sure you guys all know at home, and you're yelling it at the camera right now. Okay, so here we are coming into the home stretch. I'm going to slow down. I'm going to put in one more stitch. Okay, now I'm going to raise my presser foot. I'm going to switch to my straight stitch, and then I'm going to lower my presser foot again, and then I'm going to know that I'm in the right place to just finish this with a straight stitch so that I don't have to backstitch my blanket stitch. So then you can see that my ending is hidden and I don't have an overlapping of my stitches, and I really love that nice smooth finish to the end so it doesn't draw your eye to where you've backstitched. And I just want to show you on this block I switched my colors, so I used a blue for my center and a pink for my outside, but it's really cute too if you use the same color all the way through your block. So white is really cute, or like we talked about before, black, depending on what really suits your fancy. Thank you so much for watching this video on the helpful block for the Friendship Quilt Along. We have lots of other great videos on Fat Quarter Shop about the Friendship Quilt Along and different techniques you can use to make it. I hope you'll take some time to check those out.